All right. So we are
live streaming.
Yes, gotta love it. The magic of all the stuff that goes on behind the Zoom to the Facebook link. So it is Wednesday at 5 o'clock and Family Strong Conversations is back. I am so excited with my two guests today. We'll talk about that in just a hot minute. But for everyone, you know, the last show was in December. So I figured it was fitting to come back during this month to talk about something that's so important about preserving our family history and our family legacy. And these two guests do it right. I will be taking lots of notes during this process. So welcome everyone. As you know, I am Michelle Adams. I am an attorney, but most importantly, the author of Family Strong, 7 Gifts for a Lasting Legacy. And this book talks about different aspects of legacy that we can leave to our loved ones. And today's conversation really talks about or incorporates a lot of those gifts, but in particular, the gift of your story and understanding where you come from and what we can do to make sure that that history continues from generation to generation. So let me introduce first and foremost, and I will actually have them introduce themselves, but we have Judge Gary Jackson, retired judge from Denver County, and so thrilled that even in his retirement, I know his wife is still keeping him busy. Y'all got a lot of things going on. And his beautiful wife, the Queen, Her Majesty, Regina Jackson, who is setting the world on fire with the work that she does. And that may have to be a separate Facebook Live conversation because she's doing a lot of great things in the community. So with all of that said, first, I will start with both of you. You know, we're ending up, or we're in the midst still, but coming to the end of Black History Month, even though we celebrate it, not just for the month, we celebrate it 365, 24/7. Amen to that. But share with me, from your perspective, the understanding or the importance of understanding your family's history.
Well, let me start first, and thank you for having me. It's a treat to be able to talk to you during Black History Month. The phone just rang, so let the phone.
No worries.
Okay, but let's start with my family history, and we're going to start with my dad. His name was Floyd McLaughlin Jackson Jr. And my dad passed away about 4 years ago. And with respect to my dad, I knew very little about his family history. So I never knew his dad. He never spoke about his dad. And even though he was a junior, he never spoke about it. So he passed away with me having no knowledge about his father, other than my dad grew up in Missouri. Now, with respect to my mother, it was exactly the opposite. My mother's name is Nancia Elizabeth Scott Jackson. She is 97 years of age. She's still living today. She is computer literate. She has 3 different computers in her bedroom, and she's active on a computer every single day. She wrote a book about her life, and she self-published this book about 14 years ago. And as a result of that, I know much about her parents. I know about her grandfather and grandmother. And in fact, my great-grandfather was William Pitts. He was born in Missouri. His father was a slave master. His mother was an enslaved woman. And so he came to Colorado in 1919. And so I know that history because my mother has told me about that history. My mother has written about that history, and I have some family members that have followed up with additional research about that side of the family. So on my mother's side, which is the Scott's Pitt side, I know lots about that family history. On my dad's side, which is the Jackson side, I know nothing about that history. And I think that with Black families, that's not uncommon. And so the work that you're doing in the book that you've written regarding family heritage becomes so important.
Amen to that. We might have to get Professor Gates, Henry Louis Gates, to do. Yeah, he seems to be, he does a really good job. And I've always said, I want him to do my own family history. Just brief interlude. My story is almost in sync with yours in the sense that my dad's side, they came from another country in terms of emigrating from Jamaica. And so a lot of that history was lost, but my mom's side, we know a lot more. And we'll talk about, because I know you have your mom's book there too, and hopefully this will encourage others to really start thinking about chronicling the family history and preserving it in the form of a book. So Miss Regina, you tell me about the importance of family.
Well, my story is almost the exact opposite of Gary's. I am a military brat. My mother married a man who was in the career Army when I was an infant in arms. I never knew any of my grandparents, never, had any relatives that were biased because we moved around all the time. I like to say the girl with wings married the boy with roots.
I love
Gary
that.
has the roots and I don't. One of the things that I know, my mother was the oldest of 4 children, and she lost her father when she was, I want to say 8. He died in a fire. And then her mother at 15. So, they were orphaned. And my mom was the oldest. What I do know is the book, The Warmth of Other Suns. That is one of my all-time favorite books because I think we learn about the family traumas that Black families don't talk. Our parents don't want to tell us about their being belittled, they're being denied service, they're being denied, just basic humanity.
That's right.
I know when my father was in the military, we would always load up in the station wagon and we would drive where we were going. And he never stopped. So we could go to the bathroom or eat. And we thought, oh, Daddy is just mean. He's just mean. It was never until I was a teenager that I realized he was protecting us from racism and hostility and all of that. So, and this is a man who fought in the Korean War, served his country, and still had to deal with that. So my story, I didn't really know that my stepfather wasn't my father until I was an adult. And then I started to seek out my real father's family. Both my parents were born and raised in Chicago. So I went home to Chicago and found the other half of my family.
Wow.
I did do that. And my father had a daughter and 3 sons. So, that's the other half of my family. And my mother had 8 other children besides me. So between the 2 families, I have 13 siblings.
Wow. And I'm sure tons of nieces and nephews to go along with that.
Yes, tons and tons of nieces and nephews. And both of my parents died young. My mother was 73 and my father died in his 50s from heart disease. So, it's a very different family story. And I think Black people as a whole, unless you have somebody. Now, one of my brothers is now really into DNA and genealogy, and he will call me, and he will say things like, Jeannie, you're whiter than you think. Like, I don't really want to know.
It's like the chart says something different.
Yes, he's doing all the DNA stuff. So, now we know a lot more than what we knew, let's say 5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, the DNA testing. There was a clip, a mini documentary that Oprah's Winfrey's network did, and it debunked some of the mindsets that people had about where they thought they were from and who they thought they were. And it's interesting when you see, well, maybe just because I look this way, I may have a whole bunch of other different blood. And it ran the gamut from the lightest of the light to the darkest of the dark. They had all kinds of things in them. So we just
one of the things we know about descendants of slaves in America, we are mixed race people. There's no question about it.
I can go on about that because I'm thinking about my father's, and my father is the one with the Jamaican ancestry. He did the ancestry.com and came back with his results. And it was like 10% Scottish. Of course, it was heavily identified with the Northern, I think they called it Northern Jamaican or something along those lines, but just all kinds of stuff. So yes. Well, thank you both for sharing some of that background of your respective histories. And then Judge Jackson, I'm going to throw it back to you because you mentioned your great-grandfather, Mr. Pitts, Granddaddy Pitts. And talk to me a little bit about his, he did a lot of things, but what is one of the things that he's most well known for in the state of Colorado?
Well, Grandpa, the great Mike.
Oh, wait, I think, yep.
We can't hear you, Gary.
Can't hear you anymore.
How's this?
Perfect.
Yeah.
My great-grandfather was a part of the Great Migration from Missouri to Colorado in 1919. And the story of his migration is that he came to Colorado because his son was injured in World War I and was in the Army Medical Hospital. It was called Fitzsimmons at the time. So he came to Colorado to visit his son. His son eventually died of injuries from World War I. But in coming to Colorado, he discovered that there were greater opportunities for him in Colorado than there was in Missouri.
Yeah.
And as I stated before, he was the son of a slave master, a enslaved woman, but he learned to read and write, and he learned the carpentry trade. So in Missouri, he built homes, he built churches, he built barns. And one of the pilgrimages that my family has done after my mom wrote her book about her family history was to go back to a church in Missouri that my great-grandfather had built.
Wow.
So we went back to the church. We were there on a Sunday. We were there for the church service. We were able to give the pastor of the church a copy of my mom's book that she had written. This was in Jefferson City, Missouri. Okay. At the same time, my mother went by the library at Lincoln University, where my grandmother had graduated from college in 1917.
Wow.
To give to that university a copy of the book to be placed in her library. But jumping ahead to my great-grandfather, because he had the skill of being a carpenter, when he came to Colorado and saw what the opportunities were in Colorado versus the dire segregation that was in Missouri, he enticed his family to move from Missouri and Illinois to come to Colorado. And the enticement was, he said he would build them a home. And so what he ended up doing is he bought several lots in North Cherry Creek. He built 2 homes on Garfield Street for family members. He built a 3rd home on 5th and Harrison Street that he sold for profit. And then he also bought several lots in Lincoln Hills and built a family cabin in Lincoln Hills. So the great heritage that I have gained from my great-grandfather was the value of ownership of property. He had the vision. despite being undereducated, he had the vision that owning property was very, very important. And of course, when you think about it, the vision became like something that became very important because slaves didn't own anything.
That's right.
And he felt that the first thing that he wanted to own was real property. And so he bought the property in North Cherry Creek. He bought the property in Lincoln Hills. And just to give you a brief history, back in 1919, Cherry Creek was actually the city dump.
Right.
So poor people were living in the area, and there was basically a colony of Black families that were living in North Cherry Creek. And our family became one of those early property owners in North Cherry Creek. And Regina and I have had the benefit of being able to live on the same block that my great-grandfather built his two homes. And so my mother, who lives in a duplex with us, has lived on the same block since 1926.
That's amazing. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the Denver metro area, or even just Denver itself, yes, Cherry Creek used to be, or that part of Cherry Creek was considered the dump. And now it's the toniest address in Denver. People pay a lot of money to have that Cherry Creek North address. So your grandfather was he didn't even know it at the time, but clearly his steps were being directed in terms of the location and the fact that you all preserved that property through multiple generations.
Correct. So that is just a snippet of my great-grandfather's story, because as a part of that story in Lincoln Hills, Lincoln Hills is celebrating its 100-year anniversary. Lincoln Hills, as you were mentioning at the very beginning, was one of the 4 or 5 Black-owned resort areas in the United States in the period between, let's say, 1920 and 1965. So Lincoln Hills was the only Black-owned resort area west of the Mississippi. There had been a location in California called Manhattan Beach. That was a resort area owned by some Black folks in 1910. But in 1912, the city condemned the property, took the property from the Black ownership, turned the property into a public park in 1912. Therefore, Lincoln Hills became the only Black-owned resort area west of the Mississippi. And so, as I stated, we are celebrating that particular resort area, but more importantly than just a resort area, it was an area where Black people from across the country could buy lots to build their own cabins. And at the time that it was plotted, it was approximately 100 acres, approximately 1,700 lots. And those lots were sold to Black people from across the country.
And to think that, well, first of all, the fact that west of the Mississippi, outside of the land in California, which I think has now been restored, right? I believe that
it's been given back to the family.
Yes. So
it's been given back to the descendants.
Absolutely. Yes. So we're thankful for that. But to think that travelers, because we weren't just necessarily flying all over the country at that time, we had to get in a car, like you mentioned, Regina, and drive to the different places. And, I think it's a misnomer. When I moved here from New York, Colorado was just not even on the radar. I didn't know.
No one does.
Exactly. But for people who know, mountain property is, definitely something that people really are intent about getting, because you think about the skiing and just the respite from city life. So the fact that your great-grandfather looked at this mountain property and had the gall to say, you know what, I think we're going to develop have this development here in the mountains. Yeah.
Well, the other thing about Lincoln Hills, those of us that know about the Green Book, Lincoln Hills was featured in the Green Book as one of the resort areas that Black people could go to. So, and I have met families from Missouri, families from Louisiana, families from Indiana that have come to Lincoln Hills to visit in recent years because family members had come to Lincoln Hills back in the 1920s, 30s, and that they'd come to Lincoln Hills to visit for recreation, for vacation, by car and by train.
Yeah.
And so, as you stated, Black people were not flying at that time. If
Nobody
they were
was
visiting Colorado, they were coming either by train or they were coming by car.
It's incredible to think about this place. And I believe it was an article I was reading where someone commented that they would go during the summers. And I think it was a sibling or a cousin would hide when it was time to get back on the train to go back because they didn't want to leave, the property. So what are some of you, now first, Regina, when you moved out here to Colorado, and had you heard about Lincoln Hills before? Were you familiar with it? Or was it?
No, I hadn't. I moved to Colorado Springs. I came to Denver in 1979. I had a corporate career. I retired at 48. Because I wanted to be available to help raise my grandchildren. And my second career is as a realtor. So I've been in real estate since 2004, really 2002, but licensed in 2004. And one of the things that I can tell you that, real property is what we all need to be looking at, because once it's gone, there's no more. We're not going to produce any more real property. Yeah. And Gary's uncle, his oldest uncle, his mother's older brother, died a few years ago. But what he would do is he would go to the Gilpin County tax sales, and he would buy lots that were contiguous to our property. He had me buy a lot. I own a lot in Lincoln Hills because Uncle Johnny said, Regina, I want you to buy this lot. And I think I've had it, 4 or 5 years, just finally bought it outright. But, that property, any real property, there's no more. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I think because we're so wide open out here in the West, it's not like back east where, you go from one state to another in 10 minutes.
Right.
We have opportunities. We have those opportunities to buy property. I just read today, and I want you guys, if you are interested in buying, there are a couple of programs that have just been started so that Black people specifically can buy property. So if your income is where you can make a payment and you just don't have the down payment, there are now some programs, 2 programs that will give you money for your down payment. So call me.
And we'll make sure that people get your information at the end. And that's so important because, as you mentioned, we can't produce more land. The land is what the land is. And the hope is that we can preserve it. And the fact that this has been around for 100 years. And just to be clear, the initial property that your great-grandfather built, that structure is still standing, correct?
Yes, and correct. It's a historical site in Gilpin County. And I wanted to say about Gary's mother's book, she started journaling as a teenager. So she had all these journals over her lifetime that she could put together and write a book. So, yeah.
And thank you for mentioning that too, because I'm a huge fan of journaling. And in the moment, you don't think about it, but then to give someone the privilege of being able to look back to capture what your thoughts were, your ideas were, what was going on in the world at the time and your reaction to it. Yeah, this is good.
Exactly.
Well,
now, Michelle, let me go back to Lincoln Hills and the way it started.
Please.
Because when it started, which was back in 1922, there were 2 developers. And there's some question whether or not these 2 developers were white, Black, or Black people passing as white. So there's some question as to the racial identity of the 2 developers. But there's no question that the idea was to develop property for Black ownership. When they were incorporated, it was called the Lincoln Hills Country Club Development.
Wow.
So it was to be a recreational, social, property owning for Black people that had the means to buy property.
Mhm.
What has happened, it's come full circle in 100 years, because back in about 2012, Robert Smith, who is the Black billionaire that most people have heard about, who was born and raised in Denver and educated in Denver public schools, he purchased approximately 50 acres of the property in Lincoln Hills and has created his own summer home. So he's
Nice.
got a 20,000 square foot summer home in Colorado, in Lincoln Hills. He has a fly fishing operation, which is a private fly fishing operation. He has also created some nonprofit entities that are bringing young people and disabled people and military people to be able to visit the property in Lincoln Hills. So what I say is that Lincoln Hills in its 100 years has now come full circle from how it started to where it is now, where the biggest owner of property in Lincoln Hills is Robert Smith.
That is incredible. And the fact that, sometimes when we reach a certain level in terms of our status or our wealth, we might think, oh, we're going to get a home in Aspen or a home, some Malibu in California, or, someplace like that. And the fact that he said, nope, I'm coming right back to Colorado, and I'm not going to Aspen, I'm not going to Vail, I'm going right here to Gilpin County.
Well, he's done both, because he's got a
Okay,
home in
so-
Austin, Texas. He's got a home in New York City. He's got a home also in Colorado. So
Yes, yes.
he has done both.
Well,
But,
we applaud it all.
but we have to give him credit that he did
That's
come
right.
home. He did
Mhm.
come home. That's a part of his family heritage, Colorado, being born and raised here.
Yeah.
And he has what I consider to be a mountain complex in Lincoln Hills.
So in other words, we probably won't see that on Airbnb, right? So,
No, you will not see that. You will not see that. But the reality is that his mountain home is about maybe 2/3 of a mile from our mountain cabin. So we are within walking distance of each other. And I'm involved in a youth program for what's called the Delta Eta Boule Foundation, where we typically bring 40 young Black people up to Lincoln Hills each summer. We've been doing it for the last 5 years. And a part of the summer visit we make is to have an outing that's on Robert Smith's property. So he has made available his property for a full day outing for Black youth that are part of our program.
and let me just say this to that point. I think that's so important because, as a child who grew up in the city-ish, you need that ability to go out into an environment where you can just breathe, where there's fresh air, and you may learn to fish or swim. And I know with you, Regina, growing up in Chicago, I can only imagine, but those concrete cities, we need to kind of spread our wings a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really grow up in Chicago. I was just born there.
Oh,
I grew up
okay.
everywhere.
That's true. Yes. World traveler. I
Coast
forget.
to coast. Yeah.
The girl with the wings. So you already had your wings. So you're fine.
Yep.
Good deal. And I'll just also mention, or I'll have you all talk about, just very briefly, we talked about Robert Smith, of course, but Lincoln Hills has seen its fair share of celebrities who have come through to stay there, right? Share a little bit who came through.
Well, 5 Points, they would come to play in 5 Points. It was the stop off place. They would play. The Rossonian was down there, different clubs, but they would, when they were done playing, they would take a train up to Lincoln Hills to spend some time there. I know Zora Neale Hurston came there to write, Lena Horne, all kinds. Gary probably, his list is more thorough than mine, but I know it was a place that they would come to relax and have some time away from all the pressures of segregation and all of that.
Yeah.
I'll just add to what Regina said. The musical people that came were Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, and as Regina said, Lena Horne. The writers were Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, and then the political people that would come were people like Whitney Young, who was the National Urban League director, who was very prominent in 1963 as one of the speakers at the March on Washington. So Whitney Young on a trip to Aspen, where he would go for think tanks in Aspen, he would stop and visit Lincoln Hills. There was a lodge called Wink's Panorama. It was a 6-bedroom lodge, but there were also 10 rental cabins that Wink's Hamlet rented out from one day to a week. And during the course of a summer, 5,000 Black visitors would come to Lincoln Hills. And when I say during the course of the summer, Lincoln Hills was basically only available from Memorial Day to Labor Day, because at that point in time, the roads were dirt roads. So once the weather got bad, as it is right now, you had no accessibility to get up to Wink's Lodge during the winter time, or even our cabin during the winter time. With our family, we would come up on a Friday and stay until Sunday. And we would spend the whole weekend, because it was a 4-hour trip from Denver to Lincoln Hills. Wow. Today, I can drive from my doorstep in North Cherry Creek to Lincoln Hills in 55 minutes because of the highway. But back in those days, it took 4 hours. And therefore, we would leave on a Friday afternoon and come back on a Sunday afternoon almost every weekend during the summer as I was growing up.
My favorite Wink's Hamlet story, he had one of the only showers in Gilpin County. So he would charge people across the county to come and take a shower. It was like 25 cents for a shower and 5 cents for the soap. So he was a real entrepreneur.
And so when we say all the people across the county, so it was a place that was visited by both Black and white people. Right. And that was something else that was unique about Lincoln Hills and Gilpin County, was that the white government system, the white residents welcomed the property owners, Wink's Lodge, Wink's Tavern, and that also made it very unique. Although back in the day, to travel to Lincoln Hills, you had to go through Wonderview, Colorado, which was a Jim Crow town. So we would never stop at in Wonderview. The very first stop that we would ever make from Denver to Lincoln Hills was in Pine Cliff. So that was a little town that had a post office, a grocery store, and that would be the very first and only stop that we would make in that 4-hour trip between Denver and Lincoln Hills.
That's so, and a few thoughts I have. One, because typically when we think about mountain communities, we think that they are mostly white. And when
they are.
Yeah. There's no lie there, right? And you think also with segregation that was happening, and in so many places, white folks did not want the Black folks coming in there, and they would burn the crosses. And we know that the KKK was very, I don't want to say popular, but they were very much in place in Colorado during that time. And so the fact that there was this town, Gilpin County, or this county, but this town that was welcoming and receptive, that has to be something that is not very common to note.
Well, that's true. And I think that's something that is to be celebrated. It's something that made it a unique experience. And the fact that Wink's Hamlet and his complex of 10 cabins was able to thrive from basically 1928 to 1965. 1965 was really when it was over, because Wings Hamlet died. And when he died, his wife was not able to keep up the hotel or the other cabins, and the property was sold. In 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, although that dealt with education, that also created public accommodation opportunities where Black people could go to Estes Park or go to Glenwood Springs or go to Colorado Springs in the Broadmoor, where prior to 1954, because of Jim Crow policies, we were prohibited from going to those types of hotels and restaurants and recreation centers in places other than Lincoln Hills.
Yeah. Well, there's so much more, but I want to start, as we start to wind down the conversation a little bit, talk to me, each of you, what does family legacy mean to you? You've alluded to it throughout this conversation, but I'd really like to hear it in your words. What does family legacy mean to you?
Coming out of a corporate environment, one of the things that I really, really appreciate is that job changed my life. It gave me opportunities for training and education. I worked for the Bell system. They paid for me to get my MBA at DU. You know, I had lots of big jobs with lots of people reporting to me. So I learned some really, really good skills. And when I came out of corporate America, my goal was to be my own boss, to not work for someone else, to be my own boss. And the real estate business, if my children, my son-in-law had his real estate license for a while and he sold, he's in education now. But if my children want that, that's available to them. And, you know, Gary has come to work for me now. He's my, what do you call yourself, honey?
I'm the vice president of marketing and sales.
Okay.
That's what I call myself.
Vice president. Senior vice president. And, you know, there's an opportunity for my children. And I was just talking to my daughter the other day, you know, she's a school counselor. And, you know, I think these education jobs right now are just burning people out. The expectations, the confrontations, all the ugliness. So that's an opportunity that will be available to her if she wants that.
I love that. And, you know, when we think about business ownership and being able to pass that down to the next generation, if they so choose, that's a valuable asset that someone can hold on to. Yeah. What about you, Judge Jackson? What does family legacy mean to you?
Well, I look at it the same way. When I got out of law school, which was 52 years ago, there were only 15 Black attorneys in Colorado. The opportunities were very sparse in terms of where you could go as an attorney, as a Black attorney, 52 years ago. The major law firms were not hiring a Black person unless they came from Harvard or Yale or University of California at Berkeley. So the only available jobs were public service type jobs as a public defender, legal aid lawyer, or as I did, the district attorney's office. So my very first job was in the district attorney's office. But that job was really just a precursor to what I wanted. And what I wanted was to own my own business. So after 7 years as a government lawyer, I entered and created my own law firm with 3 other guys. And it ended up that I owned my own law firm for 37 years before I, at the age of 68, decided to be a judge. So when I look at family legacy, like Regina, a part of it is owning your own business. A part of it is owning your own property. But family legacy to me means that what you do is what I consider to be putting yourself where you are independent. You have your own independent means. Also, it means excellence. that what you do as what you do is you do it as well as you can. So excellence is important for me. And then the thing that I've learned from my great-grandfather, grandparents, uncles, and aunts is leadership.
Yes.
You've got to be a leader. You've got to demonstrate leadership for your family. And so I think that both Regina and I talk about leadership all the time in terms of its importance. And, you know, although my dad and mom did not graduate from college, neither one of them graduated from college, but both of them were leaders in this Colorado Denver community. And I can go into that at some point in time, the type of leadership traits that they had that were passed on to me, that Regina and I are passing on to our children.
Well, another big one in my family is education. Now, my mother had 9 kids.
Yes.
She went to school and got an RN's license, okay? So she wasn't hearing any excuses from us, none. She said, you are going to somebody's college. And that still is part of my family. I think amongst the 9 of us, we have like 23, 24 degrees. And,
Wow.
you know, our children are following. So that's also, you know, you have to do what you have to do so that you're able to be independent and take care of yourself and not have to rely on government, not have to rely. Because a lot of times, you know, these jobs I had sitting on my desk a year before I retired, go confidently in the directions of your dreams.
Henry David Thoreau.
You imagine a year, I looked at that every day for a year, and that's how long it took me to get up the courage to say, you know, I'm done here. I'm done.
That's so much to unpack with that. I had that same quote. Someone gave it to me, and it was I wish I could find it now, but it was a thing on my desk. And that was the impetus for me too, to leave the corporate world. But that's going to be a whole nother conversation. But I want to just pick up on what you both said about leadership and education and having the courage to pursue your dreams. And these are all things that we should be seeding into that next generation. It should not just stop with us. And they see the examples of it, because we can talk, but if they're not seeing the fruit of it manifested in our lives, then it's going to fall on just deaf ears. So I applaud both of you. And just briefly, tell us about the business. You have spoken so much about the need to have property and to own, and Mr. Senior Director of Marketing and something.
You know, one of the things, Gary and I are both doing racial justice work.
Okay.
He is working in the judiciary, and I am working with white women to say, you know, you have some responsibility in this. You know, the knee of the patriarchy is on your neck, just like it's on ours. And unless we can come together, and what allows me to do that work is I work for myself, you know, because so many people trying to have these conversations get stopped. Well, your boss doesn't want you to have it, or you're going to lose your job. I don't have to worry about that. I can do what I believe needs to be done. And that's having hard conversations about anti-Blackness and anti-racism.
Wow.
Well,
I know that's your
very
path.
quickly, Regina, why don't you talk about the 20 plus years of building your real estate business?
Oh, okay. Well,
And then
when I got my real estate, well, 2 years before I got licensed, I worked for a friend. She wanted me to come work for her, because at that time, this was about 2000. Okay. 2000. Yeah. And, you know, nothing was mechanized. Everything was manual. And she said, I want you to come and help me do that. So I worked with her, and she would always say to me, I know you're going to quit and go get your license. So after about 2 years, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to quit and go get my license.
You spoke it into existence.
Yes. So I did. And I started out with Keller Williams, and the reason why I picked Keller Williams is because they have excellent training. Again, if you don't know anything, you need to be someplace where they're going to teach you something.
Hello.
So I started with Keller Williams. I got training, then I left, went to Metro Brokers, worked in other offices, and then started my own Metro Brokers office.
Mm-hmm.
I became independent from them. I want to say maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, I decided, I don't need Metro Brokers. I'm just going to be Action Jackson Realty independent.
Yeah.
And that's what I am today.
I love it. I love it. So if someone's in the market for buying a home, and I know the market's a little bit crazy, they should reach out to this power team right here.
Yep.
Okay.
And I have to tell people, and this is so hard to tell sellers, but I tell sellers all the time, unless you're leaving the state or you're having a house built or you're going, you know where you're going to go. It's really hard to find another house. Yes, you're going to get a lot of money for this one, but your next one's going to cost a lot of money too. So, it's a really hard place to be. And buyers, it's just, I've been in this almost 20 years and I look at these prices and I just can't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we don't want to scare people off because I think it can be discouraging, but just know that you have a friend in the community who can help walk you through this process. And who knows, you might have that next Lincoln Hills where you're developing an entity where now generations upon generations can live there and call that home. So this is amazing. Both of you, Judge Jackson, Miss Regina Jackson, thank you so much. It's a much needed conversation. It's a reminder as we continue to celebrate our history every day of the year to look back and remember the work that our ancestors have already started to do. And even if you don't have this within your own family, start right now. Start where
you can build it. You can build it.
That's right.
Marry somebody with roots.
Somebody has to have the wings and someone has to have the roots.
That's right. That's right.
And marry somebody with good sense.
Oh, well. And so I was going to ask you all to close out on one message to the masses, but I think those two captured it. Marry someone with some sense and marry someone with some roots. Anything else you guys want to add?
We appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. It's so nice. And I'm going to go look for your book.
Oh, please.
I'm going to give it to my children and their families.
I will send you a copy.
Oh, wonderful.
As a small token of my gratitude. Thank you both so much. And also shout out, I forgot to say that you were recently inducted, Judge Jackson, into the Blacks in Colorado Hall of Fame. So look, I had to capture you all before you turn Hollywood on me, these superstars.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Appreciate you.
Absolutely. All right. Take care and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you all for
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.